Chapter 39, Vigil, 8:31 p.m. The man in the white shirt was the last one off the bus as he stepped down on the street. He turned back to the driver and nodded. "Have a safe night," he said. Yeah," the driver mumbled. "You too," he added a little more brightly. The driver waited for him to cross in front of the bus before pulling slowly away from the curb and heading off the other direction. Before long, the bus rounded a curve and vanished from sight. The man in the white shirt was surprised by how quiet it was, how close to the center of town the streets were. And they were empty. The restaurants were closed. He realized why. Everyone had gone home. As he turned down the lane full of small, tidy houses, he could see lights in every one of the windows, and people sitting in those windows, looking up and down the street. Neighbors huddled in small groups on the sidewalk. Old men sat on their porches. He felt their eyes searching him as he passed, trying to place him, see if they had ever known him. Everywhere he looked, people were watching, waiting, sitting vigil. Max sat on his porch step, nursing a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Beside him he sat a model plane that he had been flying that afternoon. He idly spun the propeller as he glanced up at the street corner. Still nobody there. Then he heard footsteps coming from the other direction. He leaned forward. The street was darker at the end. He squinted into the shadows. He could just make out the silhouette of a person coming closer, but as they passed in front of his house, he saw it was a woman, the lawyer who lived 4 doors down. She waved, he waved, and forced a smile, trying to hide his disappointment. Then he settled back down on his elbows again and waited. Alex pushed the curtains back and peered out at the front windows again. Still nobody. Behind him, Radar whimpered. Alex watched him circle the big lounge again, sniffing it furiously and whining in frustration. He had been calm after dinner, but now he was agitated again, pacing and whining constantly. "I told you, that's Dad's chair." Alex started towards the living room, ready to defend the chair again, but Radar pushed past him and hurried for the front door. He pawed the door and scratched it at the frame, still whimpering like mad. "Oh, gotta go, boy?" Suddenly it made sense. Radar whimpered again. Alex unlocked the door and swung it open for Radar to do his business. The second the door opened, Radar bolted. "No!" Alex took out after Radar, but the dog shot away. Like a rocket, he bounded to the yard at the top speed and jumped the neighbor's hedge, then hit the ground and kept on going. Alex chased him to the corner, but Radar was already long gone, blocks away and out of sight. Just like that. "Radar! Radar!" No way, thought Alex. What happened? It can't be over. I can't lose him just like that. He looked back at the house where he could see the light from inside spilling out his front door. He couldn't just let Radar go, but he couldn't just leave his sister alone. "Radar!" Alex stood in the corner listening for a bark, a whine, anything. He listened until his shout died off into the echoes. And then there was nothing. Silence. Radar was gone and vanished into the darkness. The man in the white shirt detoured into the big city park. He figured the shortcut would save him nearly half an hour, but he hadn't counted on the fact that it would be so dark. Usually there were ball games out here, under the lights, but tonight the fields were empty. The lights were out. He didn't want to admit it, but halfway through the park he got a little bit spooked. He was crossing the baseball field at the edge of the woods when he heard something moving. Then through the bush he froze, listening. 10 yards away he saw a figure emerge from the woods. A dog. No collar. Probably a stray. The man in the white shirt did not move a muscle. The dog saw him anyway. It paused, staring back. It was big and had some kind of bandage on its ears. It cocked its head, watching him, then looped away. The man in the white shirt breathed a sigh of relief, chuckling on his own jumpy nerves, and continued on his way. Alex felt numb. He couldn't believe that Radar was gone. So he tried not to think about it and got busy cleaning the kitchen. He wiped down the chair and vacuumed under Nunu's chair. He dried the dishes and put them away in the cabinet. He scooped the leftovers into a plastic bin and opened the refrigerator and stored them inside. And came to a complete halt. There at the bottom shelf sat his birthday cake, the one his mom made for him tonight. Tower to A, dog, it read, in green icing. Happy birthday. Alex had been told a zillion times not to stand there with the refrigerator door open. But he couldn't help it. He stared at the cake as an idea came slowly to shape his mind. When he was sure what he wanted to do, he slammed the door and headed off with purpose. He was a man with a plan. He hurried to the pantry and found a bag of birthday decorations that his mom had bought. He grabbed some scissors and tape and dumped the decorations on the kitchen table and got to work. 20 minutes later, the job was done. The banner was complete. He carried the banner into the living room and stood on the kitchen chair to pin it in the drapes. When there was a hanging straight, he stepped back and examined his finished product. Behind him, a key slid into the front door. Alex spun around. The door swung open, and there stood his mom. She took 2 steps into the room and stopped short, taking in Alex and the banner and the TV news in the background. She knew he knew everything. "Oh, Alex," she said as she pulled him into her arms and started to cry. The man in the white shirt kept a steady pace now as he crossed the tall bridge that stretched over the rail yard and narrow river. He paused briefly in the center, the highest point where he could see all the way in Manhattan, glittering like a jewel right down its southern tip, which remained dark and empty. Then he lowered his head and pushed on. Mac paced the living room, clutching the remote tightly in his fist, the walls flickering from black to blue as he ticked through the TV channels, one after the other. But the story was always the same. Alex's mom sat on the sofa. A light from the muted TV flickered over her face. She was still in her nurse's uniform. She hadn't even bothered to change. After checking on Nunu, who was still asleep, she collapsed on the couch with her arm around Alex. They hadn't said much since he'd been home. They just held on to each other. "Mom?" She thought he'd fallen asleep. "Yes? Why didn't you tell me?" She paused for a long time before answering. Then she told him the truth. "I didn't think you could handle it." She looked around her at the dishes drying in the kitchen, the banner hanging on the curtain, and the doors bedroom where Nunu was sleeping safe and sound. "I guess I was wrong." The man in the white shirt was close now. A car zoomed past him and stopped hard in front of a house in the block. A man in his 50s jumped out of the car with the speed of a guy half his age and ran to the front porch, taking the steps 2 at a time, as someone flung open the front door, bathing him in a golden light. The man in the white shirt smiled to himself, knowing he would be there soon. Mac picked up his phone and dialed again. Someone once told him the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. But Mac knew that he'd go crazy if he didn't keep trying. So he dialed again and put the phone to his ear, waiting to hear his son's voice. The man in the white shirt saw the street sign lit up by the street lamp in the corner, and his heart jumped to his throat. He turned the corner and picked up his pace. Then he broke into a run. Alex and his mom slumped over the sofa, leaning into each other like bowls of a teepee, holding each other up. Both fell asleep. The man in the white shirt sprinted across the lawn up to the porch. He tried the door, but it was locked. He searched his pocket. He'd lost his keys. The man in the white shirt laughed at himself. All this way, and he was locked out of his own house. He lifted his arm to knock sharply on the door. Max stood up and crossed the front door. He pulled open the door. And then he peered out into the empty night. He took a step onto the porch and looked towards the corner again. But nobody was there. Chapter 40. Home. 9:27 p.m. Alex flung open the front door. The man in the white shirt broke into a wide grin and threw open his arms. Alex slept on his father's chest, chest. He wrapped his legs around his dad's back and buried his face in his neck and hung on like he never let go. Alex's mom came running onto the porch right behind him and threw her arms both around the guys, squeezed between them. Alex felt warm and safe for the first time. Together they rocked back and forth to sleep. They could have stayed that way all night, and Alex wouldn't have minded. Finally, his dad cleared his throat and whispered huskily into Alex's neck. "Hey, pal." "Hey, Dad." Alex closed his eyes as his dad planted a long kiss on top of his head. "Got one of those for me?" asked his mom. "I've got 1,000, said his dad, covering her face in kisses. They stumbled inside, carrying each other along, and then Alex's dad came with a complete stop, staring at the banner Alex made, strung along the room. It read, "Welcome home, Dad." "He did it himself?" said his mom. Alex saw his dad swallow hard, unable to speak. "And he cooked dinner, and he did the dishes, and took out the trash." She went, "I'm proud of you, young man." Young man. Alex liked how that sounded. "He even put Nunu to bed," she added. "Daddy!" "Here you go, you little monkey," he shouted as Nunu hopped down on the stairs into her pajamas and ran on his arms. "You dirty daddy," said Nunu as she scooped her up. "You're right. I'm going to get her all over you." Nunu giggled and twisted as her dad rubbed his head on her tummy. Only then did Alex notice that Nunu was right. Their dad was covered in soot and grime. His face was streaked with dirt. There were pieces of gravel buried in his hair, and the white shirt and black pants looked like they decided to meet the middle at gray. "Are you okay, Dad?" asked Alex. "I'm fine. We got out in time." Alex nodded. He should have felt relief. He should have felt elated, but something was still bothering him. "Dad? Yeah, pal?" Alex forced himself to look at his father in the eye. "I'm sorry about what I said last night." He lowered his gaze and stared at his sneakers. "I didn't mean it." "I know, Alex. I always knew." Alex looked up. "How?" "It's a dad's job to know." His dad's smile was warmer than August sun. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, pal." Both of them sniffled as the tears rolled down their cheeks, neither of them a least bit embarrassed. Alex's dad stood at the kitchen counter, wolfing down Alex's hot dogs and macaroni and cheese like a starving man, which he was. He hadn't eaten a single thing since breakfast. "Alex, this is amazing. You could teach your mom a thing or two." She smacked him on the butt with a dish towel. "So how did you get home?" asked Alex. "Walked. A lot," said his dad, following their mom as she brought his food to the table and made him sit down. After shoveling down another mouthful, he continued. I even cut through the park to get home faster." "Honey, you know that park's not safe at night." "Don't worry, there was no one there," he reassured her. "Just a dog." Alex sat up straight. "A dog?" The word had barely left his mouth when outside the door the dog barked. Alex thought he was imagining things, but the second bark he knew it was real. Out on the front porch, something was barking and whining and thumping like a drum against the front door. Alex came out his chair like shot. For the second time that night, he ran to the door and flung it open, and with an instantly flattened by Radar, who pounced on his chest, started licking his face from top to bottom. "Radar!" Nunu ran up to give him a big hug. Her arms barely reached around his neck. "Down, boy," Alex laughed, pushing the dog off. As Alex stood up, his father came down the other side, his mouth hanging wide open. "Holy cow, that's the same dog," said his dad. "He had a bandage on his ear just like that. He must have followed me home from the park." Alex knew better. He was sure Alex had found his dad and made sure he got home safely. "I bet he was watching out for you." Alex's mom put her hands on her hips. "Would someone please explain to me what's going on?" Alex handled the introductions. "Mom, Dad, meet Radar." "It's his birthday dog," Nunu chimed in. "Noons." Alex now found both his parents staring at him with interest. "Okay, the thing is, I found him on the way home, and then I tried to give him back, and then he ran away. It's a long story. You brought home a stray dog? Repeated his mom. I wanted to keep him, but he belonged to someone else. The vet told me where he lived, so I tried to make him take me home. But his house was burned, Nunu explained. The vet? Asked his dad. What vet? Radar was trying to protect us and chased away these bullies who wanted to beat me up, and then they threw a bottle at him and hit him on the head. Wrapped up in his tail, Alex didn't seem to notice his parents' befuddled, slightly horrified expressions as they tried to follow along. So I took him to the vet, and that's where he got the bandage, but he kind of scraped it off when he scrunched under the fence in front of the druggy house that burned down. Alex's dad's mouth opened and shut, like he wanted to ask something, but he couldn't figure out which one of his 38 questions to start with. Meanwhile, Alex's mom, nursing instinct kicked in. She bent down to check Radar's bandages. You okay, Big Ty? You took care of my babies? She laughed as Radar licked her hand with a meaty tongue. She scratched his neck, and Radar's tail whacked like the wall like a jackhammer, and that it just made her laugh a little harder. And then Alex knew everything was going to be all right. Across town, Mac came in and closed the front door behind him. He had been sitting on the porch watching the street until he finally grown too chilly. As he passed through the kitchen, he glanced out the window into an empty street corner once more and then put the pot of coffee on and settled back to wait. He would wait all night and all the next day, but Mac's son would never come home. The next morning, Alex's mom made his favorite birthday breakfast for the second day in a row. The trains to Lower Manhattan were still shut down, so his father had the day off. As for the four of them tucked into their pancakes, Radar sat on Alex's feet and stared at him intently. Finally, Alex grinned and plucked a pancake off the stack. Radar, fetch! He shouted and flung the pancake across the room like a frisbee. Alex! His mom laughed, as Radar bounded across the room in 2 steps and caught the pancake in midair and then wolfed it down in a single gulp. He likes your cooking, honey, said their dad. She threw him a fake angry look, but still enjoyed the compliment. She turned to Alex. So, is there something you'd like to do special for your birthday +1? Alex thought about it for a long time. He thought about airplanes and video games and pizza and baseball and cupcakes and the Yankees. Yeah, he answered. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. Alex's dad found a parking spot in front of the burned-out lot at 417 Van Orton Street. As they all got out of the car, Mac appeared on his front porch, looking tired and suspicious. But it was just like before. As soon as he saw Alex and Nunu and Radar, his face opened up, and the kind old man smiled out. Alex led the way through the front gate, carrying a plastic food container under his arm. Mac bent down and gave him a big hug, then stood back out as Alex introduced his parents. Alex's dad put both hands around Mac when he shook his hand. Thank you for taking care of them, his dad said quietly. It's my pleasure, Mac smiled. Mac led the way inside. Nunu introduced them to Dottie and flopped down the sofa behind her to watch cartoons. I'll go put on a pot of coffee, said Mac. Alex stepped forward. I'll help, he said. His parents hung back. They knew he wanted a moment alone with Mac. Alex led Mac into the kitchen. I wanted to give you this first, he said, as he opened the food container. Inside was a big piece of his birthday cake, the green icing on the top red dog. Saved you a piece, said Alex. Mac nodded and got very quiet. What say we share, he said, opening a drawer and taking out 2 forks. Alex put his hand up. Wait! He pulled 2 birthday candles out of his pocket and stood them up on the cake side by side. Then he found the matches his dad had loaned him and struck one carefully and held it to the first bare wick. Better to light a candle, Alex said. Mac looked at Alex in surprised recognition and then broke into a wide, gentle smile, his eyes dancing in the warm glow of the flickering flames.